The man who laughed at funerals. Asempa was a small village tucked between rolling green hills and a winding river. The people lived simple lives, farming the land, fishing in the river, and gathering at the village square in the evenings to share stories. Life in Asempa was peaceful, except for one mystery that no one could explain, the strange man named Nana. Nana was not like the other villagers. He kept to himself, living in a small hut at the edge of the village. He was tall, with a thin frame and sharp, piercing eyes. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words were often puzzling. But what made him truly strange was his habit of laughing at funerals. Whenever someone in the village passed away, the people would gather to mourn, shedding tears and singing sorrowful songs. But Nana? He would stand at the back of the crowd and laugh. Not a quiet chuckle or a nervous giggle, but a deep, loud, booming laugh that sent shivers down the villagers' spines. People whispered about him behind his back. He must be cursed, some said. Maybe he is mad, others murmured. No sane man would laugh at a funeral. Children were warned to stay away from him. Even the elders, wise as they were, did not know what to make of him. Nana, however, never explained himself. Whenever people asked why he laughed, he would simply smile and walk away. One day, an old woman, Mame Afia, confronted him in the market. Nana, why do you laugh when people cry? She demanded. Nana only shrugged. I laugh because I see what you cannot. His words only added to the mystery. What did he see that no one else did? The villagers did not know, and they did not want to find out. They only wished he would stop. But they knew, deep down, that he never would. And soon, his laughter would cause even greater trouble in the village. Elder Kofi was one of the most respected men in Asempa. He was wise, kind, and generous. When families had disputes, he settled them. When children were hungry, he made sure they ate. People often said, without Elder Kofi, Asempa would not be the same. So when the news spread that Elder Kofi had died, the entire village fell into mourning. His son, Danso, was devastated. He had always looked up to his father, and now, without him, he felt lost. His mother, Ajoa, wept endlessly. The villagers gathered to comfort the family and prepare for the funeral. He was old, some said. Perhaps his time had come. But he was healthy just last week, others whispered. What happened to him? There were rumors that Elder Kofi had been sick for days before his death, that he had complained of a strange taste in his food. But no one dared to say it out loud. All anyone could do now was give him a proper farewell. The funeral would be grand. The entire village would attend, and people from neighboring towns would come to pay their respects. But as the preparations continued, one question hung over everyone's mind. Would Nana come? And if he did, would he laugh? The day of the funeral arrived. The villagers gathered under a large canopy near the village square. Women wore black cloth, and men dressed in dark robes. Elder Kofi's family sat at the front, their faces filled with sorrow. The priest stood and began to speak about Elder Kofi's life. He spoke of his kindness, his wisdom, and the way he had united the village. People wept softly as the priest continued. Then, from the back of the crowd, a sound rang out. A deep, loud laugh. Heads turned. Eyes widened. It was Nana. He stood in his usual raincoat shirt and dusty sandals, his face tilted toward the sky as he laughed. It was not a polite chuckle nor a small snicker. It was a full, joyous laugh, like someone had just told him the funniest joke in the world. Danso's heart pounded with anger. How dare this man mock his father's death? Danso stood up, his voice shaking with rage. Why do you laugh at my father's funeral? The crowd murmured, some calling for Nana to be thrown out. But Nana did not stop. He laughed harder, holding his stomach as if he could not contain himself. Danso stormed towards him, his fist clenched. Tell me. What is wrong with you? Nana wiped the tears of laughter from his eyes and looked at Danso. I am not mocking your father, he said calmly. I laugh because I see what you cannot. The villagers gasped. What do you mean? Danso demanded. Nana shook his head. You would not understand, he said. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. For a long time, the villagers stood in stunned silence. The funeral continued, but no one could stop thinking about Nana's words. What did he see? Why did he laugh? And most importantly, was there a secret behind Elder Kofi's death? After the funeral, Asempa village was no longer the same. People whispered in hushed tones about what had happened. The sadness of Elder Kofi's passing still lingered, but now there was something else in the air, curiosity and fear. Danso, still fuming, sat outside his father's house, staring at the setting sun. His mother, Ajoa, sat beside him, her face still swollen from crying. That man, Nana, she muttered, he has no shame. Danso's jaw clenched. I won't let this go. He insulted my father's memory. But why does he do it? His mother asked, shaking her head. Why does he laugh at funerals? Danso didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing, he would find out. The next morning, he began asking around. First, he went to the village elders. Has Nana always been like this? Elder Ofori, the oldest man in the village, stroked his grey beard. Nana has always been different, he admitted. No one knows where he came from. He arrived in Asempa many years ago and settled at the edge of the village. He barely speaks to anyone, except when necessary. Has he always laughed at funerals? Danso asked. Elder Ofori sighed. Yes. And whenever we ask him why, he says the same thing, I laugh because I see what you cannot. That only made Danso more determined. If Nana wouldn't explain himself, then Danso would find the truth on his own. And something told him, his father's death was not as simple as it seemed. Days passed, the village tried to move on from Elder Kofi's death, but Danso could not stop thinking about Nana's laughter. Then, just as Asempa was beginning to heal, tragedy struck again. One evening, a young woman named Abina was found dead near the river. She had been one of the kindest people in the village, always helping others, always full of life. But now she was gone. The villagers were heartbroken. 2 deaths in such a short time. It was unheard of. And then the rumors began. Abina was always close to Elder Kofi, some whispered. She knew something about his death, others said. Maybe she was silenced. Danso's blood ran cold. Had Abina been killed, because she knew something about his father? And most importantly, would Nana laugh at her funeral too? The funeral was held at the village square. It fell too soon after Elder Kofi's death. The villagers were black, mourning yet another loss. Danso sat at the front, his hands clenched into fists. He kept glancing at the crowd, searching for one person. Then he saw him. Nana stood at the back, his arms crossed. His face was calm, unreadable. The priest began to pray. Abina's mother wept loudly. The village was filled with sorrow. And then, it happened. Nana began to laugh. It was the same deep, booming laughter. The same sound that had haunted Danso at his father's funeral. The crowd froze. The air felt heavy. Abina's mother screamed. Why are you laughing at my daughter's death? People turned on Nana, their faces filled with anger and confusion. But this time, Nana did something different. He stopped laughing. And he spoke. I do not laugh at her, he said softly. I laugh because the truth is near. The crowd gasped. What truth? Someone shouted. Stop speaking in riddles, another yelled. Nana did not answer. He turned and walked away. Danso's heart pounded. He could not let this go. He would follow Nana and get the truth out of him, even if it meant forcing it out. That evening, Danso followed Nana to his small hut at the edge of the village. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the trees. Nana sat outside his hut, staring at the sky, humming softly to himself. Danso stepped forward. Tell me what you meant, he demanded. Nana did not turn. The dead do not rest until their stories are told. Danso frowned. What stories? Nana finally looked at him. His sharp eyes seemed to see straight through Danso's soul. Your father, Nana said. And Abina. They were killed. Danso's breath caught in his throat. What are you saying? My father died naturally. And Abina, it was an accident. Nana shook his head. No, Danso. The truth is hidden. But not for long. Danso felt his words spinning. If Nana was right, that meant his father had been murdered. Abina had been murdered. And the killer was still in the village. Danso could not sleep that night. Were his father and Abina really murdered? If so, how? And why? He needed proof. He began asking people about his father's last days. That's when he spoke to the village herbalist, Mema Kojua. Did my father ever come to you before he died? He asked. Mema Kojua hesitated before nodding. Yes. He came to me a few days before his death. He complained of stomach pain. I gave him some herbs, but something was not right. What do you mean? Danso asked, his pulse quickening. Mema Kojua lowered her voice. It felt like poison. Danso's blood ran cold. Poison. She nodded. Your father's symptoms were strange. I warned him to be careful, but it was too late. Danso's mind raced. If his father was poisoned, who did it? And did Abina know? Was that why she was killed? Danso knew one person who might have answers, the housemaid, Afia. And he would not leave her alone until she told him the truth. The next morning, Danso went to his father's house and found Afia washing clothes. She looked up, startled. Afia, he said, I need to talk to you. She hesitated. About what? My father's meals, Danso said firmly. Did you ever notice anything strange? Afia's hands trembled. I don't know what you mean. Danso stepped closer. Afia, if you know something, tell me. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean for anything bad to happen, she whispered. Danso's heart pounded. Afia, what are you saying? She wiped her tears. Your uncle, Kwame, often came to the house. He insisted on preparing special meals for your father. He said it was a family recipe. Danso's world shattered. His uncle. Had Kwame poisoned Elder Kofi? And if he did, what else was he hiding? Danso stood frozen, his breath shallow. His uncle, Kwame, had been preparing his father's food. Why? Afia wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice shaking. I didn't know what he was doing, she whispered. He always said it was to keep Elder Kofi strong, but after your father died, I started wondering. Danso clenched his fist. Did you ever see him put anything strange in the food? Afia hesitated, then shook her head. No, but one time, after he cooked, I tasted the soup. It had a bitter taste. I didn't think much of it then, but now? She stopped, eyes filling with fresh tears. Danso's mind raced. If his father was poisoned and Kwame had been the one cooking for him, then his uncle had killed his own brother. But why? Danso had to find out. As Danso left Afia's house, his heart pounded in his chest. He had to confront his uncle. But just as he reached home, he noticed something odd. A small piece of folded paper had been slipped under his door. Frowning, he picked it up and opened it. Danso felt a chill creep up his spine. Someone knew he was investigating. And they wanted him to stop. But that only made him more determined. Instead of backing down, he would go to Nana. He needed to know everything the strange man had seen. Danso found Nana sitting outside his small hut, staring up at the sky. You knew, Danso said without greeting him. You knew my father was murdered. Nana nodded. Yes. Danso clenched his jaw. How? Nana finally turned to face him. Because the dead do not rest when they are wronged. Your father's spirit lingers, waiting for justice. Danso shivered. Then tell me, Nana. Who killed him? Nana's gaze darkened. The one you suspect is guilty. Danso's stomach twisted. Kwame. But he did not act alone, Nana continued. There is another. Someone close to you. Someone who helped him. Danso's breath caught in his throat. Another person. Who? He demanded. But Nana only shook his head. That is for you to uncover. But be careful, Danso. The truth is dangerous. Danso knew he couldn't stop now. He had to keep digging, no matter what it cost him. Determined, Danso started speaking to his father's old friends, asking if anyone had noticed anything strange before Elder Kofi's death. One elder, Bodu, hesitated before answering. Your father was worried about something in his last days. What was it? Danso asked. Bodu sighed. He was having secret meetings with someone. And after one of those meetings, he seemed troubled. Danso's pulse quickened. Who was he meeting with? Bodu hesitated, then finally said the name. Abina. Danso's blood ran cold. Abina, the girl who had just died mysteriously. Had she known something about his father's death? Was that why she was silenced? He had to find out. Danso went to see Abina's best friend, Ifya, who had been crying for days over her friend's death. Abina told me something before she died, Ifya said, her voice shaky. She said she had discovered something terrible. Danso's heart pounded. Did she tell you what it was? Ifya wiped her nose. No. She only said she needed to tell the elders. But she never got the chance. Danso felt sick. Abina had known the truth. And she had been silenced before she could speak. There was no doubt anymore. She was murdered. And the murderer was still walking freely in the village. Danso could not hold back any longer. That evening, he went straight to his uncle's house. Kwame was outside, sharpening his machete. He looked up as Danso approached. Nephew, Kwame said with a smile. What brings you here so late? Danso didn't waste time. I know you poisoned my father. Kwame's smile faded. What nonsense are you talking about? Danso stepped closer. You were always in the kitchen. You insisted on cooking his food. And now I know the truth. Kwame's grip tightened on the machete. Be careful, boy. Accusing me of something like that could get you into trouble. Danso's heart pounded, but he did not back down. If you didn't do it, why did someone threaten me to stop asking questions? For the first time, Kwame's face darkened with something Danso had never seen before, fear. Danso took a deep breath. You killed my father. And I will prove it. Kwame set his machete down slowly. His voice was dangerously low. You don't know who you're dealing with, Danso. Danso narrowed his eyes. I know enough. He turned and walked away, but he knew this was far from over. Kwame was hiding something, and now, Danso was sure of one thing. Someone else was involved. The next day, Danso went back to Afia, the housemaid. Afia, he said, I need to know the truth. Did my uncle ever tell you anything? Afia bit her lip, avoiding his gaze. Afia, he said gently, you're scared. But if you don't speak, more people will die. Tears filled her eyes. She took a deep breath and whispered, Kwame wasn't alone. Danso's heart pounded. Who helped him? Afia hesitated, then finally said the name. It was someone in your family. Danso's breath caught in his throat. Who? Afia wiped her tears. Your mother. Ejoa. Danso's world shattered. His own mother had been involved in his father's murder. And now, he had to face the most painful truth of all. Danso felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. His own mother, Ajoa, involved in his father's murder. It couldn't be true. His hands trembled as he looked at Afia. Are you sure? Afia nodded, her face pale. I didn't understand it at first, but I overheard them talking. Your uncle and your mother. She told him, we have to do it now before it's too late. I didn't know what they meant at the time, but after your father died. Danso felt sick. His own mother had betrayed his father. His whole family was built on a lie. But why? Why would she do this? There was only one way to find out. He had to confront her. That evening, Danso went home and found his mother sitting by the fire, stirring a pot of soup. She looked up and smiled. You look tired, my son, she said. Sit. Eat something. Danso clenched his fist. I don't want food. I want answers. Ajoa frowned. What do you mean? Danso took a deep breath. I know you were involved in my father's death. The wooden spoon dropped from her hand. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a trembling voice, she asked, who told you that? It doesn't matter, Danso said. I want the truth. Did you help Kwame kill my father? Ajoa's hands started shaking. Her breathing became uneven. Finally, she whispered, I had no choice. Danso's heart pounded. No choice. You poisoned your own husband. Tears filled Ajoa's eyes. I didn't want to kill him, Danso. I loved your father. But he was going to ruin everything. Ruin what? Danso's voice shook with anger. Ajoa wiped her tears. Your father found out something about Kwame, something dangerous. He was going to expose him to the village elders. Kwame came to me, begging me to stop him. He said if I didn't help, he would take everything from us. I was scared, Danso. Danso couldn't believe what he was hearing. So you chose him over my father? Ajoa sobbed. I thought I could control it. I thought if we just made your father weak, he would stop interfering. But the poison worked too fast. I never meant to kill him. Danso felt like he couldn't breathe. His own mother had helped take his father's life. And now there was only one thing left to do. She had to face justice. Danso knew he needed proof. His mother's confession wasn't enough, he had to make her and Kwame admit their crime in front of the whole village. He went back to Nana. I need your help, Danso said. Nana nodded. I knew this day would come. Together, they came up with a plan. Danso would gather the village elders and call for a meeting. He would trick Kwame and Ajoa into confessing everything in front of the whole village. It was risky, but it was the only way to make sure justice was served. The next evening, Danso sent word to the village elders, asking them to meet at the village square. People gathered, curious about what was happening. Kwame arrived, standing confidently among the crowd. He still believed his secret was safe. Then Ajoa arrived, looking nervous. Danso stepped forward. I called this meeting because the truth about my father's death must be revealed. The crowd murmured in confusion. Kwame frowned. What are you talking about, nephew? Danso took a deep breath. You poisoned my father, Kwame. And you didn't act alone. My mother helped you. Gasps filled the air. People turned to Ajoa, who looked like she might faint. You're lying. Kwame shouted. But then Nana stepped forward. The spirits of the dead have spoken, Nana said in a deep voice. Elder Kofi and Abina were murdered. And tonight, the killers will confess. The crowd held its breath. Danso pulled out a small leather pouch. This is the same abo poison that was found in my father's system. And guess who had it? He turned to Kwame. You? Kwame's face turned pale. Then, the final blow came. Afia, the housemaid, stepped forward. I heard you and Ajoa planning it. You both wanted Elder Kofi gone. The crowd erupted in shock. Ajoa dropped to her knees. "I didn't mean to kill him," she cried. "I was scared." Kwame tried to run, but the villagers grabbed him. He had nowhere left to hide. The village elders stood in silence, then finally, Elder Ofori spoke. "You have broken the sacred trust of this village," he said to Kwame and Ajoa. "Murdering a leader, betraying your own family, and poisoning the ones who loved you." He turned to the crowd. "What is the punishment for such crimes?" "Banish them," the villagers shouted. Kwame and Ajoa were taken away, exiled from Asempa forever. Justice had been served. But the village would never forget their betrayal. After everything was over, Danso sat beside Nana outside his hut. "You always knew," Danso said. "That's why you laughed." Nana nodded. "The truth is a heavy burden. Most people refuse to see it." Danso shook his head. "I hated you at first. I thought you were mocking my father's death. But now, I understand." Nana smiled faintly. "When the truth comes out, it sets the spirits free. That is why I laugh. Not out of madness, but out of relief." Danso nodded. "And now, my father can finally rest in peace." The village slowly began to heal. People no longer feared Nana, they respected him. Danso worked hard to rebuild his family's name. He took over his father's role, helping those in need and ensuring that justice was never ignored again. The village elders declared that a new tree would be planted in the village square in honor of Elder Kofi and Abina, two souls who had died for the truth. And for the first time in a long time, peace returned to Asempa. One evening, as the sun set, Nana and Danso sat together, watching the villagers go about their lives. "You know," Danso said, smiling, "this is the first time I've seen you not laughing at something." Nana chuckled. "Perhaps because, for once, the truth has already been seen." Danso laughed along with him. For the first time, he understood that sometimes laughter was not a sign of cruelty but of freedom. And with that, the man who laughed at funerals was finally understood.
I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Also turn on your notification to get more enchanted tales like this one. Goodbye.